So we've been talking the last few weeks about pride, and a couple weeks ago we talked about the cure for pride, which is to have the mind of Christ, this idea of humility and servanthood that was not only taught to us by Christ, but modeled to us by Christ. Last week we talked about the who, that the Most High God is actually who bestows these things upon us, and looked at a story where a couple of kings kind of had a hard time figuring that out. This week we are going to talk about how to be a survivor. How do we survive pride and move on something greater, move on beyond pride into something greater? And when it comes to pride, a lot of what can be kind of the root of the situation, or kind of the mitigating factor of pride, if you will, is kind of what you're known for. Now, all of you are known for something. And you're known for something at work, and you're known for something in your circle of influence. You're known for something in the family. Sometimes you're known for good stuff, like you're the guy that always ... Sometimes you're known for bad stuff. That's the person that always, whatever. But we're all known for something, and that has a purpose. I got to thinking about, here's some of the things I'm known for. I got some pictures to show you. Most of these you've seen. Things I'm known for. Top left-hand corner, I was known as the kid with the bad haircut and the big glasses, right? We've had that conversation. Now I'm known as the adult with the bad haircut and the big glasses, but some things never change. There at the bottom, a lot of you don't know this, your pastor is actually known in some circles as a rock and roll icon. Top right corner, I was the guy in the band that had the wicked dance moves, or at least they were ostentatious. I absolutely love being known as people's pastor. I love that I get to perform weddings and be for people in those special moments. That's a really cool thing to look back on. The thing I'm most proud of, I'm known to many people simply as just Amanda's husband or as Lily's father. And so these are all the things that I'm kind of known for. And each of you is known for something, and it can be good or bad. In business, sometimes you're known if you always show up early, always work a little harder, always meet your quota. You're always the go-to guy. It's good to be that guy. It's good to be known as that woman or that man. But you can also be known as the one that shows up late, leaves early, can't be depended on, and you don't want to be known as that person. What you're known for changes from time to time. It changes depending on what the audience is. We can have certain circles where we're known as one thing, and you can have the certain circles of people that really know you, and they know you for something else. And we can even kind of bank shot our own self-esteem on what we're personally known for. I want to show you a group of words that we're all familiar with in this particular culture. Friended, followed, liked, and mentioned. This is kind of what a lot of our culture revolves around, and we use it on social media. A lot of your businesses that are on social media or on the internet, it is so important to make sure that you're mentioned, that make sure you're liked, that, please share this, please like this, please click on this. And we want more friends, more follows, more likes, more mentions. No one cares, by the way, at all. But we want these things, and the more followers and friends and likers and mentioners that we have, the more we want. That's human nature, right? That's how you breed Kardashians. Just the more, for those of you who don't know who the Kardashians are, ask your grandkids, they'll explain, but that's how that works. The more you get, the more you want. You attain a certain level of notoriety, you attain a certain level of famous for being famous, and you want more. You have to have more mentions, more followers, more likes. And perhaps if these words don't strike a chord with you, perhaps the next set of words will. Recognized, admired, sought after, and even as much as we don't like to admit it, many of us like the idea of being envied. All right? Now this is hard to swallow, but guys, let's face it. You like it when you go out and your wife, your significant other, she looks a little bit better than the other guy's wife, right? You like it when people look at you and are envied. Ladies, that's why you make your husband change shirts before you go, no, don't wear that. I don't care if they see you in that. I don't want people to see you with you in that. Because I want people to look at us and at least feel like we have it together. I want people to look at us and at least a little bit, I want them to envy us. And even if you're an introvert, even if you're the person that doesn't sign the card, even if you're the person that gives anonymously, everybody likes just for one or two, they just like to be known for something. They just like recognition for, at least I'm good at this one thing, and I like my attaboy, I like my pat on the back. I like to be known for that. Case in point, on Sundays, I stand back at the door, and close to 300 people filter past me, except the ones that sneak out the sides. And over and over and over and over, here, good service, great message, good service, good service. Some of you older folks tell me I'm cute and I'm adorable, and I love that. I love that. And, some of you think, if I give the pastor a compliment, it's the same as putting something in the offering plate. It's not, by the way, but that's what we assume. But the one person whose opinion I put a lot of weight in is my wife's opinion. And at some point on Sundays, she will normally say, hey, you did a good job, or hey, you said what needed to be said, or you did that well, or whatever. And it's to the point where if I give her till about 1:30, and if I don't hear from her, I'm just like is okay? Was it okay? But because I'm seeking validation, all right? Because we all want to be known for something. Perhaps you're familiar with the words of the philosopher, if you will, the well-known philosopher Lady Gaga, who says, "I live for the applause, applause, applause. I live for the applause, applause. Live for the way that you cheer and scream for me." All right? That's just kind of how we're wired, and it's not in a lot of things. Many of you are like, I don't want recognition, and I guarantee I could find something that you just want a little validation for. You just want to be known for that thing. So today we're going to talk about somebody who was actually really well known, somebody who was particularly famous. Maybe you've heard of him. It's a man by the name of John the Baptist. All right. Now, John the Baptist was had tremendous fame. Who here has heard of John the Baptist? Right? Okay. And if we would ask people who are not in church and ask them about John the Baptist, most people have heard of John the Baptist. Now, I got to thinking as I was preparing this, technically I'm John the Baptist, but this is a different guy. There's John the Baptist out there. I mean, there's a few of us here, but John the Baptist was extremely well known. And just to put this in context, who here thinks anyone will be talking about you 2,000 years from now? Anybody out there think that your name will come up in conversation 2,000 years from now? But we are still talking about this guy. So this is not a scripture or a message about how not to be known, or how not to be recognized, or how not to be remembered, or how it's bad to be famous. But it's actually a message about how to keep that in context, to handle it, to manage it, and to survive it. So we're going to look at a little bit about John the Baptist today, starting with Mark chapter 1, verse 4. It says, John appeared baptizing in the wilderness and proclaiming a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. Now, anytime we read Mark's gospel, Mark is like the Cliff Notes gospel. He just gives you the most important information. It says John the Baptist appeared. He didn't just like pop out of nowhere. You can read his birth story in the Gospel of Luke. He was born right before Christ. But it says John shows up and he starts baptizing people. And the significant thing about this is actually, John is the first record we have of anybody baptizing other people. The Old Testament Hebrew Jewish culture, they had a process, a cleansing ritual they would go through where they would baptize themselves in certain periods of time, and it was this idea of dying to one thing and being alive to something else. But for all we know, John is the first record of someone baptizing someone else. That's kind of how he gets his name, John the Baptizer. And verse 5, it says, and all the country of Judea and all Jerusalem were going out to him and were being baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Now, this is kind of one of those detail verses that you skim over, but it's really significant because it says everybody was going to see him. All right, now, even if this is maybe artistic hyperbole, where, oftentimes you say, man, everybody was at Walmart on Saturday, okay? Everybody wasn't there, but it's just so many people. Even if this is hyperbole, it still is referencing hundreds, if not thousands of people. So perhaps you've seen this presented in cinema or on TV or on movies, and there's always a couple ladies like with some clay pots in the corner, and there's a little gaggle of people in funny hats over here, and a few people. But this would have been, a tremendous number of people to be referenced in this manner. And he was in the wilderness. So to be a part of what John had going on, or to go see what John had going on, was not a casual involvement. It was not a casual endeavor, because it would have been a day to get there, a day to kind of hang out and see what was going on, and then it would take them a day to get back. So the people that were there, not only was there a whole lot of them, they had made a 3-day journey, a 3-day commitment, because nobody had kind of seen this kind of energy, this kind of excitement in a long time. So John the Baptist is in the wilderness, baptizing folks. The Bible describes his appearance. He was a bit of an odd sort. He'd taken Nazirite vows, so he kind of looked a little weird. He dressed a little weird. He ate some weird stuff. We hear a little bit more about John all throughout the Gospels. We're going to look at John chapter 1, the Gospel of John, different John, chapter 1, verse 15. It says, John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." Okay, so John starts preaching, and when he says this is him, he's talking about Jesus. And stay with me on this, because if you think my sermons are confusing, John was really throwing him for a loop. He says, he who's coming after me, you haven't seen yet, is greater than me, because he is before me, even though he came after me. And everybody's like, well, that doesn't make any sense, but there's a lot of people here, so I guess we'll write it down, right? He's like, you don't quite understand, but the one who is coming after me is actually before me, so he ranks higher than me. You got that? Makes sense? Verse 19 says, "And this is the testimony of John, when the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who are you?' He confessed and did not deny, but confessed, 'I am not the Christ.'" Okay, so as was the case, the religious leaders start kind of murmuring and walking around, and they say, you know what, there's a lot of energy, a lot going on, a lot of people following you. Are you, Messiah? Are you the Christ? Are you the one? Could you be the one we're waiting on? And John, point blank, straight up says, no way, I'm not that guy. Verse 21 says, "And they asked him, 'What then? Are you Elijah?' He said, 'I am not.' 'Are you the prophet?' And he answered, 'No.'" Okay, now there's a prophecy at the end of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, when it's talking about the Messiah, and it mentions that the Messiah would be like Elijah, or Elijah-like. And so they're like, look, are you Elijah, or is this some kind of reincarnation? Are you somebody that we've heard of? Are you somebody? And he's like, I'm not any of those things. Verse 22. "So they said to him, 'Who are you? We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?'" So they are priming the pump, and they are prepping John the Baptist to give an introduction of himself. Now, have any of you been in this situation? Many of you have, I'm sure, where, have you ever been introduced? Okay, maybe like the day you get married, and when you walk into the reception, I would say, "Mr. and Mrs. blah, blah, blah," and everybody cheers and screams, and it makes you feel really, really good. Or maybe you've been called onto a platform, and people clap for you, and it, you get to be introduced. You get to proclaim who you are. You get that moment where it's not just, "Hi, I'm James Bond," but it's, "I'm Bond, James Bond." Right? "I am Inigo Montoya. You have killed my father." You get a chance to proclaim who you are and your purpose. Right? And they're priming him, and they're feeding him, and they're throwing him a softball to say, all right, John, now's the chance to say, "I'm John the Baptizer," and just like to proclaim who he is. And they toss him a softball, and instead he says this. He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." John shares an Old Testament prophecy. This is verse 23. And he says, look, I'm a sign. I'm a directional marker. I've attracted people to me, and make no mistake about it, John had a huge following. I've attracted people to me so I can point people to him. I've drawn a crowd around myself so I can point that crowd to him. The one who came before me and is after me, and you guys don't understand that, but he surpasses me. And the whole reason for all of this, the whole reason you're even talking to me, the whole reason you know enough about me to ask me questions about me is so I can point you to him. Verse 24 says, now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, then why are you baptizing if you're neither the Christ nor Elijah nor the prophet? The Pharisees always kind of worked in this manner. They had kind of these back alley meetings, and they couldn't lower themselves to ask these questions of John the Baptist or later Jesus, and so they would always send people. And so he gives us this little detail that, these guys have been sent by the Pharisees, and they're kind of just trying to figure out what's going on, and they're continuing to ask questions. Verse 26, it says, John answered them, I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie. It's like, look, I'm the warm-up band, not the main attraction. You just wait, because there's somebody coming, and he uses this imagery of sandals, and the people that would put your sandals on, take your sandals off, wash your feet, that was a slave's job. And John's saying, the guy that's coming after me, not only is he better than me, I'm not even worthy to operate in a slave capacity for him. And in our culture today, it would be, the guy that's coming after me, I couldn't even get a job bussing his table. Like, I am not even worthy to mess with his scraps. Like, we are that much separate in how great he is and how little I am. But verse 29 says, the next day he saw Jesus coming toward him. John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Now, we've talked about this before. Behold is just a fancy Bible word for look. So John says, look, the reason I am so well known is so when I speak the life-changing truth about this guy, you might listen. Behold, this is the one that we've all been waiting for. Verse 35, it happens again. It says, the next day, again, John was standing with two of his disciples, and he looked at Jesus as he walked by and said, behold, the Lamb of God. John, like any teacher, any person of great influence, would have had disciples, like a lot of people had, like Jesus had. And he's standing with these guys who would have studied and learned under John, and he makes this proclamation about Jesus in front of them. And verse 37 says, the two disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. Now understand how discipling works. If they followed Jesus, that means they unfollowed John. They're like, look, if this is the guy we're waiting on, bye. And they, if your stuff was temporary, then we're going to go this way. And that's where two of Jesus' disciples came from. They were originally disciples of John. And that didn't bother John because he understood why he had what he had. He understood his notoriety was for something. But it did bother some of John's other disciples. If we move over to John chapter 3, and this story continues, some of John's other disciples, in verse 26 of chapter 3, it says, and they, being his other disciples, came to John and said to him, Rabbi, or teacher, he who was with you across the Jordan, that was Jesus, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing. John, baptizing. That's your thing. And now he's doing it. You've puffed this guy up, and now he's baptizing. And so you got to spice it up or something. We're going to have to start doing doubles, maybe do two at a time. Maybe we throw in something a little bit more exciting, do some tricks, maybe have baptism at a water park. Something, maybe if you did it a little closer to the city. Maybe it's the trip that people don't like. But something, because this guy has stolen your shtick. He's kind of doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And the second part is more telling than the first. The second part of that verse says, and all are going to him. John, not only is he stealing your gimmick, but it's working. It says he's baptizing people, and now everybody that was following you, all the fame you had, all the notoriety you had, he's taking it. Jesus is taking it. And then John says something so kind of profound and so powerful. for us today, it's so applicable, because this is the statement that can allow you to have as many friends and as many followers and it never go to your head. But it also is for you in those days where you don't have a lot of friends and you don't have a lot of followers and you're not the prettiest or the smartest or the most accomplished in the room. And verse 37 says, John answered, "A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given to him from heaven." Something the kings in last week's story, if you recall, didn't quite grasp. But John says, all of this knownness that I have, where do you think it came from? Every good thing comes from our Heavenly Father, and all of my fame is temporary. It's a gift. I'm a steward of it. And I will not make the mistake of thinking for one second that it's somehow about me. Verse 28, it says, "You yourselves bear witness that I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him." It's like, let me repeat myself. I'm not the guy. I've been pointing to the guy. I'm just here to make him known. And he makes a pretty famous statement, one you've heard before, in verse 30. He says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." And look, disciples, that might bother you, but it doesn't bother me. We think about being a steward, and we think about the tangible stuff. We talk about being good stewards of our money all the time, that we're blessed with things, and so we have to be judicious in what we do with that money and how we give and things like that. And we talk about simply being a steward of our resources, the things that we have, and being good stewards. Being good stewards of our time, making sure we're judicious with how we spend our time and our priorities. But you are also a steward of your knownness. Any influence you have, what you are known for, any relationship that you have, is for a purpose. You are given the relationships and you are given this fame, whether it's with, maybe you're just the most important person in your kid's life, or maybe you are famous to dozens or hundreds or thousands of people, but your knownness is for something. Our known is a means of making him known. Our known is a means of making him known. If you've been given fame or influence or authority, it is simply to point people to Christ. Can we have the next slide, please? Whatever you're known for, good or bad, you can be known for something really, really good, and that can point people to Christ. Consequently, you can be known for something really bad, something kind of tragic, something you wish hadn't happened, something you may even regret, but that can be redeemed for God's purpose, and you can be known for something bad, and that can point people to Christ. You're known as a means of making him known by whomever you're known by. A few people, a lot of people, somewhere in between. Our known is a means of making him known for as long as you're known. Sometimes we have brushes with fame. Sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it lasts a lifetime, but by whomever you are known for, as long as you are known for whatever you're known for, your known is a means of pointing people to Christ. The only reason you have the resources that you have, the only reason you're known for the stuff that you're known for, is ultimately so you can point people to Christ. And John the Baptist, he didn't shy away from, he didn't shirk away from his fame or his notoriety, but he survived it because he used it to point people toward Christ. So to be a survivor of pride, remember who it's from. Remember who it's for. Last week, the story we talked about the kings, King Nebuchadnezzar, King Belshazzar, and they just didn't quite remember who their power was from. They just didn't quite grasp where all these tremendous resources came from. And sometimes if we've worked our way up the pedestal a little bit, sometimes if we're known for something that we're really proud of, we kind of forget where that's from. But ultimately, all of us oftentimes forget what it's for. And your resources and what you're known for is to point people to Christ. In other words, our known is for his renown. Everything you've been given should point to Christ. Parents, grandparents, you have tremendous resources, and you lavish them upon your children and your grandchildren. And it's so they can, right, so they can have a better life than you had, right? I want them to have things I didn't have, opportunities that I didn't have. And there's nothing wrong with that. Parents work really hard so your kids can have a good life, and grandparents work even harder so your grandkids can have a great life, right? That's the difference between parents and grandparents. But your number one priority, the only reason you have anything, any resource, whether it's knownness or financial or otherwise, is to point that child to Christ. If you've been given authority over people at work, if you've been given a certain level of influence in your family or your circle of friends, that's good for a lot of things. That's good for stability, and that's good for community, and that's good for your lot in life. But the number one purpose of knownness is to point people toward Christ. This meal that we celebrate today is a reminder of what leadership looks like. It's a reminder of what you do with the resources you have. Because as we talked about at the very beginning of this series, that the cure for pride was simply to have the mind of Christ. That the only person who ever had a legitimate claim to pride, the only person who actually was God in a body, better than all of us, humbled himself, taught servant leadership, and modeled servant leadership. So to survive pride, we take everything that we've been given, we take our knownness and our fame and our resources, and we point people to this example of servanthood, this example of humility, this example of love that was poured out so lavishly on us. Invite our deacons forward as we go to the Lord in prayer this morning.